9th of January. Item 1, do we have any apologies for absence?
We have apologies for absence from Councillors Carr, Councillors Castle and Councillor Lang.
Great. Thank you. And item 2, we've got 2 sets of minutes to approve from the 30th of October and the 27th of November. Does anybody have anything they want to raise on the minutes? And if Nick?
A question about the October minutes. Place today you said that they were going to share the national formula for calculating social value with us. We had that from
Have we?
Well, I certainly got one. I can't remember who. I just remember who. What it was about, but who sent it.
Oh, we did actually. I think we didn't. We get it just about straight after the meeting. I think like the next day or something. I think we did. I do remember. Yeah. Yeah.
I think it was actually Jill. You sent it.
That's right. Yes, and it was quite complicated. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so everybody happy to approve those minutes? Thank you. And then item 3, disclosure of members' interests. Does anybody have any interest in disclose? No. Item 4, forward plan of cabinet decisions. As usual, this is on for information, so everyone's aware of what's coming up. Any comments?
I'm interested. Like you might have, we had a budget. We had our budget and is there an overview scrutiny committee on Monday?
yes.
Because I haven't got in my diary, and I don't know if anybody else has, but nobody else seemed to.
So as you know, every year we have the Corporate Services Overview Scrutiny Committee. We invite all the scrutiny members to attend. This year, because we actually moved the date because of the Holocaust event last week, and it coincided with the policy conference, decided that the policy conference would probably suffice for most members. However, a number of members have been in touch and say, is that going ahead or not? And so an invitation to all scrutiny members will be sent this afternoon for the meeting on Monday. So
We're going to be getting the papers today.
in the paper, you will be getting you'll be getting the papers for the meeting on Monday. But I think I also understand that the draft cabinet papers will also be certainly.
I take the opportunity to ask.
Yeah, I think to be honest with, I think the cabinet be confused on this one. We thought the policy conference was suffice, but in actual fact, a lot of members would actually like the opportunity to go to scrutiny on Monday. So we are sending that invitation out.
And for anybody that does want to go, it's in the council chamber at 10 o'clock.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So item 5 is the best review of regulation and enforcement activities. Colin, do you want to introduce it before we?
No,
I know it's Gordon's. Gordon has sent his apologies. He sent me a message yesterday. So we'll go straight to Jill then. Thank you, Jill.
Thank you very much, everyone. I've also got Sandra Kane online as well. So for those of you who might not know me, I'm Jill O'Neill, Executive Director, Public Health, Communities and Inequalities. And I have been picking up from Audley Kingham, who has been the Executive Director, who's had oversight of the review process that Sandra is going to talk through. And then I've picked it up in relation to the implementation of the new model and the way of working, which is why I'm here presenting today. So I know you've got copies of all of the slides. Sandra, who is poorly and being a trooper, who's going to present and hopefully without a coughing fit, is going to cover the first part, which is the review process, and then I'll pick up in relation to the model and the structural changes, and then open up for comments, if that's okay.
Great, that's fantastic. So over to Sandra. Thank you, Sandra.
You're on mute, Sandra.
Okay, can you hear me now?
We can.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so what we're going to go through today is, as Jill's talked about, is the reason for the change, what we were asked to look at, the objectives of the review, what we explored, who we involved when we were doing the work, what we found, and then the development from that of the Northumberland model, and then some structural changes that are being implemented to support that model, and also look at our implementation timeline. So why we're particularly looking at the change around here, there are a number of organisational drivers, particularly around the inequalities plan with the community's first focus and ensuring equality and equity for all citizens, of all of our residents. The strategic objectives that's very much around resilient communities, working better, more efficiently, what our best objectives are around improving outcomes for our residents and enhancing experiences for our customers and staff. We've got the council's ways of working principles, which were applied to the review, and the imperative to change as an organisation. So looking at our culture, our approach, and how we work and how we deliver services. So we were asked to carry out the review of regulation enforcement through BESS to identify new ways of working. The objectives of the review were around developing proposals for Northumberland that ensured a consistent approach to regulation and enforcement, looked at removing any silo working and duplication that was happening currently, had made sure there was clear lines of accountability, providing assurance to the council that we are meeting our statutory obligations, and really importantly, delivering on the council's commitment to safer communities. And we were also asked to explore how we make the most of making every contact matter, making every contact count, and how we could deliver a proactive and preventative way of working through data-led approaches. What we looked at when we carried out the review, excuse me, we looked at what our statutory obligations are, what we have to do. We looked at who did what, where, why, and how. We looked at what our current operating model is, how they interacted with each other. We also looked at how they interacted with partners and external organisations. We obviously looked at the budgets, the finance, the funding, how it was made up, how they were managing at the moment, what that reporting framework looked like around performance management. We looked at what data and intelligence is already collected and how they were using it. And we after drawing all that information together, we considered if the current operating approach was meeting the needs of the organisation, and looking at what other organisations did, other local authorities, and how they approached their regulation and enforcement. So who was involved in the review? It was led by Audrey, as Jill said, but she was supported by a project group of exec directors, heads of service, and service managers. We held workshops with staff right across the organisation that are involved in regulatory and enforcement activities, and they fed into the findings that we had, the information that we already had, and gave us a little bit more background and knowledge around it. And their involvement and input actually informed the development of the Northumberland model. So what we found in the review, there was a significant amount of activity going on across the council, and there was many positive outcomes, and staff showed a real commitment to providing good quality services and resolutions for the organisation and our relatives. But they highlighted several challenges in being able to carry out their roles effectively, and some of it was around feeling that there could be more robust strategic direction and ownership of the activities as a whole. There was some duplication where they were working on the same issue, but not really able to get to the bottom of it and find a very effective resolution to it. And that there was an awful lot of knowledge in areas. There's a lot of specialist knowledge across the organisation, but not a lot of knowledge about who does what in other areas and what their expertise was. There is a feeling of a lack of sharing data, and some of that, you know, is necessary because of data protection, but they felt that they could make better use of the data that we had. There was concern around not being able to take direct action because there was no funding to do it, so there was continued enforcement action. And they did feel sometimes that there wasn't a lot of coordinated activity, and that could be better for them. And there was a concern about lack of capacity, and capacity tended to be very much, right, well, this is what our capacity in our area, we can't share it because we've got so much to do. And some of the key points that we took from everything was that there needed to be a more robust governance framework around what was happening, and strategic leadership needed really to be at the core of that. At the moment, we need to introduce a better reporting framework so that strategic leaders have an overall view of the council and what's happening, and there is compliance assurance there. The current operating model could be inconsistent with limited collaborative working, and working more effectively could eliminate some of that duplication of effort and look at enforcement action and cost as well. Excuse me. Sometimes there was not always delivering the best service to customers because it could be a little bit confusing and complicated to navigate, and that was feedback that we got from some of the residents and also some internal customers and external partners. And as I've said, there's a lot of specialist knowledge and expertise. I'm really sorry, hang on. Sorry. There's a lot of specialist knowledge and expertise and intelligence and data that we could use more effectively. So realistically, we were presented with an opportunity to look at what Northumberland needs. How could we do this better? Some model that meets the needs of the council, better outcomes for residents, and strengthens the working relationships with partners. So I'm going to hand over to Jill. I just need to come out with this 2 seconds so I can go on mute, and Jill will take you through the rest. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandra. I appreciate you coming on, and I hope you make a swift recovery.
Just to emphasise a couple of points that Sandra's made there before I talk about the model specific. There is a huge practice that happens across the council within these different departments, working day in, day out around the year to keep our public safe and our businesses fair and safe as well. So this isn't about anything that's broken. This is about improvements and refinements. I think that's a really important message to share. And also when Sandra mentioned about one council approach, this is about collective responsibility. And at the point of doing the review, it was very clear that there was very much linear ways of working to have better, to have responsibility. And by having corporate oversight across it all, we're much better able to understand a place-based approach to this work, so that we don't have inadvertently trained standards team operating over in here, but at the same time we've got environmental health working over here, and it might be that we need to get them to work better together. So this is under the banner of the Regulatory Code of Practice. So some key words that I just want to highlight to you are around proportionality, accountability, consistency, transparency and targeting. And they're the key things that are all under that national code of good practice when it comes to regulatory powers. But what we do want to do and be aligned with all of our wider work of BEST, as Sandra's highlighted, is that we shouldn't go straight to enforcement. And it's not the appropriate thing to do. We know that there's a lot of that can be done at that preventative level around better ways of communicating with our public, with our businesses, so that people are better able to understand how to be safe and compliant and self-help themselves, rather than wait until people get into some areas of poor practice and need us to come in and regulate. So we want to shift that work to be more around communication and engagement and trying to advise as much as possible. And then when it does come to being earlier intervention and looking at regulation, have a very clear stance of policy of what do we stand for as Northumberland County Council. That's clearly our policy, but also the strategy that we have, so that if people want to, if we are engaging with us, no matter which area of the council, it's consistent, and that's incredibly important. And then, but ultimately, by having the different strategic approach, which I'll come on to in the next slide, at the point in which we do need to enforce or even move to prosecute, we've got clear understanding of what the implications are, what the risks are, what our thresholds are, and how we see that through to the end point, because we do want to work in partnership with, but also we need to utilise our powers to the best possible effect to show that we're a council that is determined to keep our businesses and our public safe. Can you just go on to the next slide, please, Sandra? So at the minute, we have operational collective groups working together, and we have different executive directors with different sets of functions and responsibilities under schemes of delegation and distribution. What we're wanting to put into place is a strategic oversight group, which will consist of myself, Stephen Gerrard, the Director of Law and Governance, Monitoring Officer, and also Simon Nielsen, Executive Director of Place and Regeneration, because between the three of us as a collective, we all have that oversight, working closely with our lead members, and also being held to account into overview and scrutiny. What we want to have is a tactical group that will drive forward our new enforcement strategy that, again, very much highlights what we stand for as a local authority and also where our direction of travel is going to, so that we can have assurance processes. And at an operational level, it's making sure that we're bleeding out into our partnership world and having much closer relationships with policing colleagues, for example. We've got strong relationships with policing colleagues, but there's more that we can do to join up in relation to that enforcement and proactive ways of working as well. Next slide, please, Sandra. So the way that we want to do this, and this is getting into the week of operational delivery, but the strategy that we're going to be developing is based on a regulatory excellence framework from the Government Association, and it will be about what's our leadership, what's the collaboration with others, focus on that customer engagement and that customer feedback loop, and making sure we are we're working in a safe and compliant way and being as responsive as possible. But also, if we're much more data led and targeted, we can justify why we are working in one area and potentially not in another area, because I'm sure we all appreciate sometimes there's a difference between a perception of something happening and a reality of something happening. And the more we use our data, the more effective we can be to show how we're appropriately targeting quite finite resources at time. And that's into the third area of people and activity management, looking at our workforce and how much we are making sure we've got talent management and we're bringing people through in public protection and regulation and enforcement areas. And then ultimately being able to say what we've achieved. Currently, there's only the food and feed report that comes through into Cabinet, for example. It's a statutory obligation to come through. There's a lot more statutory work that we sign off, and that goes into national regulation. But let's have a look at that and celebrate where there's good practice happening, such as an annual report of trading standards, but also to be able to share where is it that we haven't been able to work as effectively as we could, and what is it that we want to do about that going forward. So this framework will enable us to be able to share much more transparently back to the code of practice and consistently how we've done our targeted work and delivering against our outcomes. Next slide, please, Sandra. So that's the model. I'll move on to the structural bit, if that's all right, to finish the presentation and then open up for comment. So this wasn't about moving deck chairs and moving people around for the sake of it. If you're not familiar, the current team of public protection, of which there are 9 service areas, sits within the fire under Graham Binning and Darren Wilson, who's head of service, and Colin MacDonald, who's senior manager. We've looked at all of the team in relation to the new way of working, and inevitably we've seen that there is more appropriate structural alignment in some places for this team, rather than all being collected under fire and rescue. I really want to emphasise there's been no redundancies in this. There hasn't been any people significantly or fundamentally changed. This has been about changing roles, sometimes a change in job title, but there has been no one lost their job compulsory out of this. And we have worked hand in glove with trade unions to make sure staff have been fully consulted. As Sandra said, they've been part of the development of the model. And then we've had the feedback shared with the teams once it was approved through our executive management team and through SLT for line of sight. And our communication plan continues working closely with the teams. Next slide, please, Sandra. Just for crossing the I's and dotting the T's, this is going to be, and the timeline is on later. We are now in the implementation phase, and I'm chairing an internal implementation group to make sure this all lands on a safe day one, which is going to be the 2nd of April. And these are the teams that are going to be moving across the council, either into my directorate or into Simon's directorate. So you can see here, for example, private housing that currently sits in public protection will be moving across into Rob and Susan's area. Building control, again, will be moving from public protection into housing and planning, and then we've got environmental enforcement, which is pest control, animal waste, is moving to neighbourhood services, and then the bulk of the team, as in the rest, are moving under my directorate, either direct report to me as my statutory role of Director of Public Health for the environmental protection, trading standards licensing, and then under Paul Brooks, which is the Safe and Resilient Community subset of my directorate for community safety, of which we've already got responsibility for strategic community safety. So hopefully you can see that there are natural alignments there that will bolster existing functions. But just to remember, this is all about knitting it back together again for that corporate way of working from a strategic governance perspective. Next slide, Sandra, please. So our anticipated benefits, and we're going to keep tight review and look at this, because this has been quite a seismic piece of work for us. But this is about staff development and improving efficiencies and different ways of working. For us as a local authority, the anticipated benefits are very much around improved collation and recording and better understanding of shared data sets and intelligence, as well as much better corporate oversight of the totality of our regulation and enforcement work. And when we finish these products, it's not all going to be done on day one, on the 1st of April. This is going to be then a year of action planning to improve our web pages, our strategy, our policy, so that we are very clear to our residents and our businesses how we operate as a local authority through our refreshed enforcement policy and strategy. Next slide, Sandra. Is that just the final one for time? So timeline, as I say, we've established our implementation group, and we're working on it actively on the implementation plan with all relevant teams. And you can see that our go live for a safe day one is in April, and then the next year is very much about how we embed this. Thank you.
Great, excellent. Well, thank you very much to you both. That was really good. So we'll open up to questions now. If I could just ask members to remember that this is not the right place to ask specific questions about enforcement issues in your ward. We do that sort of offline. This is really about these fairly well described seismic changes, and so I'll open up. Who would like to go first? Nick.
I think I've got 3 questions. First one's on the timeline. Are we on track? I think it showed that the action plans were going to be created in mid-January.
So the implementation plan, yes, we've got a SharePoint site with our Gantt chart that is operationalising. What does this look like if staff are moving? What does this look like for schemes of delegation changing? What does this look like for the handover of budget? So yes, we're on with that very operational action plan. The wider enforcement strategy and action plan will be a piece of work for us to do beyond April.
And on the governance arrangements slide, it shows that the officers at tactical level who are the ones driving the enforcement strategy. it says that they're going to also develop the strategy.
Yeah.
And that just seemed odd to me. Yeah, I'm sure there's a reason for it, but I would have thought it would be the office at the strategic level who would have developed it and the office at the tactical level who would have driven it.
I think that's a really good point, and what we've actually already started to implement early, and it's handy that I've got Rob in the room, because Rob's going to be our director lead for the development of the enforcement strategy, is we've already started to do the scoping of what that looks like. The officers in the tactical group know the detail, but are still strategic in their mindset, if that makes sense. So we will receive at a strategic level the enforcement strategy to approve and assure us of, but really it's that tactical level that will understand the detail that needs to go into the strategy.
That makes sense. Yeah, thanks. And then one more question, if I
Yeah,
could.
yeah.
On the anticipated benefits slide, it says that we're going to develop ways in which the local communities influence social setting and the actively involved communication. How are we going to make it, and is it wishful thinking that we'll get residents to actually get actively involved in this?
I think that's a really fair and good question. If I can use the example under strategic community safety, where we've got our thriving neighbourhoods subgroup, we've done quite a lot of work around understanding the community's needs around antisocial behaviour, for example, and being able to work with that local community to say, okay, these are our powers, this is what we're able to do, but actually what is it that you could work in partnership with us on? And we've been able to find some resolution of actually, if the community do this and we do that, that creates a better whole. So I'm hoping that we will be able to take that kind of a model and replicate it. And part of the new way of working is for these teams to have more of a place-based association, so that they can understand their neighbourhoods a bit better. So I think that's something that I'd like to come back in a year's time, and you asked me that same question, and we can say, are we starting to see that happen properly?
Thank you. It's good you've got a model to follow. I guess it's all about making this relevant to communities, isn't it? Explaining why it actually matters to them.
Yeah.
And if you can do that, I think they will actually want to engage.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you, Nick. Anne.
Thank you very much. It's quite an interesting report, and it's obviously quite deep, and there's obviously a lot of feeling about obviously the workforce, about whether it's dysfunctional working. I think first of all, one of the work things you say is remove silos. Silos take quite a long time to remove, and unfortunately, when they start rubbing closer together, that's when you hit sometimes problems. One of the things the thing is actually getting everybody to work together and working closer communication. And so I have this thought, which I really feel quite strongly about, is actually how officers are now working together in this building. And my view is that actually, if you want people to work together, you need to be working together, not on the internet, not on thing, but where you can actually have people working together, understanding, people chipping in and saying, I can do that. I can give you lots of examples where there's been total breakdown and unknown because actually they're all working at home, etc., and you haven't got that knowledge base. So you maybe need to look at how you actually the officers work instruction, everybody comes in certain times or whatever, but it shouldn't be one off one day. You know, because these people, these officers, really, they go out every day doing different work. Some of it's very difficult, and some of them need backup resourcing and everything else like that. So I think that needs to be looked at quite carefully, and that will give them better understanding. Because at the moment, everybody being away, whether it be COVID or whatever, people are actually working in their own silos. They haven't got further funding to do the work they should be doing because they're not funded, or the lack of resources in some areas. And I just think that there's a bigger fundamental change rather than documentation, which, you know, I could understand it all, but it's not giving the fundamental change about the debate, going back to basics about, you know, staffing and how staffing work. The other thing is, which you say in here, I'm sorry, I can't find it, where you've got, here we are, it says strategic level, provide strategic leadership on cultural change to communities first. And I think we need to have a direction about actually what that means. because, you know, we've got communities together. We've got inequalities, we've got everything. What does that communities first mean? Because, you know, I haven't seen that word. We all know we want communities first, but what does it actually mean? So if you put a plan up, what does it mean? Who's going to come from where everybody's going to have an impact and work together? So those are just my third thing. The other thing is actually funding to actually ensure that people can work together and everything else. There's probably proper funding in place, and I know where there is a shortage of funding in various places. But we need to look at that carefully and not infer that the council officers can just go and jump on board and do this. Because actually it needs some backup, it needs some funding, but it needs also that senior leadership saying, we're going to do this, and we can do it, and we'll give you everything we can to actually make you able to do the work. Sorry about that.
Do you want to comment on any of those comments?
Just briefly, the culture change, you're absolutely right. This is about our culture and our leadership and the approach. And that is a significant part of BEST. At the BEST Budget Policy Conference last week, I presented on Communities First. This isn't a new team. It's an ethos. It's a way of working. It is absolutely everything you know through the cross-party working group where we've talked about Communities First, that this is about asking what can communities do for themselves, what do they need some help with, and when is it that is our statutory or civic responsibility. So when we talk about Communities First, it's a way of working, an ethos and a culture.
So can we have that on I think we can have that so we can actually, maybe we want to add to it because we know our communities. And rather than council taking over things that the communities are doing already, that shouldn't happen, but it does. Yeah. It should actually be, you know, building on the ability of the community to actually enforce and help themselves.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you. A quick question from me. You mentioned during the presentation that where possible, you try and avoid going straight to enforcement. So often it's about sort of regulation and influence and so on, which is great. But occasionally you will need to go to enforcement. And are the sort of, is this, all these changes are going to be supported with proper sort of legal support and legal resources to be able to actually do that? Because I'm aware in some areas, sometimes things kind of get to the point where it needs enforcement and then it sort of slows down.
So legal have been part of this throughout, from the beginning, middle and the end. And as I say, you got Stephen at the top in that strategic enforcement group to have a look at this, because we are aware that in some cases we need to go further in relation to finalising prosecution and such like. So this is a big shift in emphasis that where necessary we need to follow through with that. So yeah, absolutely. We've got Lisa Bishop, one of our senior legal team, as part of the implementation group, and will be instrumental in developing our strategy as well.
Yeah, and sometimes a quick legal letter can obviate the need for sort of formal proceedings, can't it?
That's an oxymoron.
Great. Anybody? Brian, and then Jeff.
I welcome any changes. It's going to be an improvement to the council and the way the council work. And I think Anne probably strong there on the recruitment of staff. We've got a lot of new staff that come in. That and I'm not just talking about recently. I'm probably seeing about the last 2 or 3 years that do work in silos, and I can only see it from my experiences. And I'm not going into detail about them. But the reality is, it's a tick box exercise with your new staff, and I think that any new staff that should come in should be able to, within that short time of being trained or getting to know Northumberland County Council, they should realise that maybe one thing that they do may upset or hinder the next department. And Rob will know this because I brought this up a few times with Rob through planning. So the whole idea is that the introduction of new staff and the gelling of new staff and the understanding that what they do affects other departments. That's one thing. Working in silos, again, you were on about partners. We should reflect on partners. Again, coming back to planning, sorry, Rob, but it's, we've got developers that will come into Northumberland and want to build houses. And I've heard from developers that they would never come back into Northumberland because of departments, and not just about planning, but various other departments, highways. So we need to have that review further down. And I know you said that, you know, you would be working with lead members. You need to go a bit lower than that and go to the core face and talk to those people and see what the problem is and let them be able to have an honest reply back to that. I think they're around enforcement, and I think you kind of touched on it, but we have to be proactive rather than reactive. And some things we definitely have to have a different say, and that reassures everybody. It reassures our council, our management teams, our partners, our elected members and residents as well, because that is not happening at all. The one thing you said about web, we're going to improve the web pages. I've also reminded we've got an elderly population in Northumberland and not everybody's online.
Absolutely.
So we need to take them away with us as well. So I welcome what's going to come for the hope that it's going to improve. And it's reassuring that nobody's been made redundant either as well. That is the case. But I would just hope that the best policy in the future doesn't bring redundancies. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Jeff?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I see where the councillors fit in at the top of the pyramid, looking at the outcomes. But I don't see anywhere where the councillors are anywhere in the other tiers. You're talking about engaging with the community. I will remind you all that the community are right here. People casted a vote for us. We're not self-appointed. We're not agitators. We're not, well, perhaps some of us are. I don't have a mirror, Brian. So it's kind of, I just feel sometimes councillors are used to steady the organisation, to criticise, to offer advice after things have been done.
Mm-hmm.
So like today, this is your plan, but I don't see anywhere where it says, when it talks about community, literally, it's here. People walk down the street or stuck their thing in the post and voted for us. So if you're going to start engaging with the community, you'd better start engaging with us first. That's kind of all I'm saying. And I think all of us would think that quite a lot of the time the organisation as a whole does not communicate with the community, literally. So it's not a question really, it's a criticism. I can see where you're using the councillors to oversee all this and to correct problems and all the rest of that. But I do not see anywhere where any of us can intervene at those bottom levels, or you ring somebody up and say, what do you, can you tell me what's happening with motorbikes in your area at the minute? Or, what antisocial you're saying you're going to go out and ask the community. Well, if we, sorry, I should get off my soapbox now.
I think that's essential. So can I just add to that in a way, because I think it is a good point, Jeff. Obviously, we've got something that is close to launch. It's going to be launched in 2nd of April. Presumably, there's going to be some sort of comms plan around that. But can we also make sure that sort of possibly, somehow some training, a session for all councillors, not just the people on this committee, and then also I think a really important part of that comms plan is getting to town and parish councils as well, because they're the other part of the community that actually probably more hands-on the ground than many of us are, but it's sort of and then that way you'll get buy-in. And then as a third point, at some point in the future, probably in a year or so, then this comes back to whoever's on this committee after the election, and for a bit of a review to see how it's gone so far. So there's sort of some kind of recommendations coming out of that.
That's really helpful, and it actually covers a couple of points back to your point around staff and new staff. We are building in the likes of Community First into staff inductions, and we've got an array of people from. I was with Training Standards colleagues today, and we've got people who've worked here for 38 years, 40 years, and then we've got new apprentices. And you're right, it's about that bleed across. And it's about making sure everyone has a shared understanding of the cultural changes that we're emphasising. Your point's really well made and absolutely right. I can hear it and I can see it, that we do in the operational level specifically, we do need to make sure we've got that voice recognised and we can adapt those, because nothing has launched yet. We have only just had approvals just before Christmas to progress. So very timely and welcome. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Eileen, so Eileen, then Anne, then Brian. And then...
I'm going to be working across different services, which is great if you all come together. But how's this going to work when you actually have working from home? Do you know what I mean? Before COVID, people were working in a big office together in a big building. You will get to know each other's face and things like that. Walking through the corridor would say, oh, there's John from, say, Trading Standards. That doesn't happen when you've got the working at home now, which a lot of people are still doing. How are you going to gel the teams? How's it going to come together? Because it's fragmented. The way working is now, people always working at home, it's not the same work.
So I think there's a couple of things in there, because we've got Work Smart as our corporate approach to make sure that we have flexibility for our staff, which staff want in relation to Sandra's poorly at the minute, but she's well enough to work, but Sandra is working from home. So there are times where, in particular, these teams who are out and about, it might be quicker and more efficient for them to start and finish at their home address if they're doing visits, and if we then insist on them coming back to do their paperwork, that is, at times we've had feedback, that can be quite old-fashioned way of working. There is also a lot of evidence to show co-location doesn't always mean better working together. You can have teams that sit alongside each other and barely communicate, but I absolutely agree there is a time and a place for that collective coming together, which I see through these operational level groups. There will be natural alignments of groups where on a regular basis different professional groups will come together to talk about a common thing. So I do think there's a balance to be had between working from home and office working.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I think maybe next time there's a workforce report to this committee, we could actually ask for a specific bit on the council's approach to getting that balance right between working from home and being located. Anne and then Brian.
Just to add to one thing, the one thing you haven't said about area services, and I think that's an important thing, because, for instance, we still have obviously area depots where we've got a considerable amount of people who work from there. And they don't come to County Hall, maybe they come to County Hall once a month, but each different area. So the Tarndale area have a totally different area and totally different enforcement matters and everything else than, say, Blythe, Wansbeck, Walkers, whatever, Alnwick. We all have. So basically, I think you need to look at the area working relationships. So, and I can tell you how our area working relationships, and they all work together quite well. We've obviously got, for instance, in some cases, got lack of funding for people, or it's not the resources and specific enforcement things. But basically, they do, I work with them and they're very good. But I think you need to ensure and understand that each different area might need different training, because they'll have different problems. And that might need to be, thought about more carefully. I don't know, but you could. I don't know if you ever do a job. What we used to do is a chart where saying this is what you've got to do. Who do you need? And people actually know who they are, and therefore each area will have a different need because the different people, etc., are needed.
And that's back to being better data-led and informed and manipulate our data, which we're not doing at the minute on that place base, for us to understand, well, who else is doing what in here? Can we step away and be more proactive and preventative? So that is our intention. Won't be there on day one. but
No, it'll take, it's a learning exercise, but it needs to have the, you need to have the actual cultural will to actually do that.
Great. Okay, thank you. And final word as always to Brian.
As always, it's good to hear about the data and how you find it, but we've got to be very careful. The data led has to come in from all directions, and I think you've covered that. One thing I wanted to bring around the staff, we've got some very good staff at Northumberland County Council, but all departments have a tendency that if somebody puts a month's notice in, or 2 months' notice, or decides to retire in 6 months, we'll wait until that person's gone, then put the advert out. Then the department's undermanned for about 3 months, if not longer. Now, whether that's for a budget reason, I'm not sure, because everybody's under strict problems with the budget, but that has to be a tighter time. So we know that somebody's going to finish in a department. Let we have a conversation with them. Let we try and get that advert out as soon as we can, and let we get the right people in place as soon as possible as well, because that just puts stress on the rest of the staff. And then you find out, you know, that we've got people on the sick. So it's a double whammy that really it doesn't work. The one point that I want to make is that the biggest silo for me, in my experience, is finance and legal. So I want them to move and work closer together. There's not always a price on doing the right thing, but there always seems to be a price on something to stop it. So they're the only points. And thank you very much.
Great. Okay, well, thank you very much. Been a very thorough presentation. Thank you, Sandra, for making the effort. Appreciated. And hope you do get better soon. So yeah, that was a very interesting presentation. Recommendations we've made, and which Nicola will have taken note of. Good luck with it, and we look forward to hearing more about it.
Okay,
Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Communication plan coming back in the liaison with both councillors and town and parish councils. And then there was also anything about workforce is a separate thing, which was looking at split working in the next report that comes to on the workforce. Great. Okay, so the second item is also really important, and it's about the common allocation policy, common agricultural policy. And it's, I think Colin, are you going to introduce it and then pass over to Susan? We've got Susan and Rob here to
an overview to start with. Yeah, review of the common allocation policy. So why do we need to review this? It's like any policy. I mean, this policy is over 20 years old. Any policy has got to be reviewed to see that what it was trying to do 20 years ago is still doing the same today. And unfortunately, this policy does need updating, because it may have worked well many years ago, but now it's actually distorting the housing figures and making life difficult for officers. 40% of the people that's on this list are not in any sort of housing need at all. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, I'll give you some examples of what happens to me when people contact me and they've got their name down and they're in the band 3 and they're trying to push the cases, and you go along and you see them and they've got reasons like, well, I've got my name down just in case. I've got my name down because the rents are a lot cheaper, and I've got my name down because I want to move. Well, they're all nice reasons, but they're not the sort of reasons that the council have to take on board from a point of view of housing them. So, and also remember that this county-wide policy does not just relate to the council; it relates to the RFL as well. So they have to abide by this as well, and they are finding life difficult. But funnily enough, just this morning we had a meeting with the RSLs, not about this, about something completely different. But this came up, and the amount of time that they're spending trying to sift through all these names, update them all the time, and they're not targeting the real housing needs. So there are things in this policy that will be strengthened. I mean, I would particularly want to insist that the rural connections strengthened, and why that? Because in the rural areas you get very little new water out of it. And I remember a case in my area about 15 years ago. There was 20 new affordable homes. And because they didn't all go to local people, it caused an awful lot of unrest. So we need to strengthen that side of it. So what we need now is the policy updated to meet the modern needs of the people of Northumberland. Policy is robust, streamlined, and fit for purpose. Because as it stands, with the 14,000 people that's on this list, 40% of them are not in the housing need. And it gives rise to all sorts of things, you know, in the press, on television. Papers say, no, there's 14,000 people homeless in Northumberland. Absolutely nonsense. So we've got to do something to make life, make the figures more accurate and fit for modern day.
And Susan's going to tell us about that plan and that process.
Not the presentation of, or people got it on.
We've all got it, but I think it's just coming.
Yeah.
Here we go. There it is. Yeah.
Right, yeah. Right, I think just to carry on there, thanks for the introduction. You know, to carry on there, obviously about, you know, the common allocation policy is Northumberland, it's our policy, but it is in, you know, it is in partnership with all the other RSLs. So any social landlord in Northumberland who's allocating properties that adhere to the common allocation policy. And I think before going on, I'll just mention as well that Home Finder, where does this kick in? And I think we've got the policy, and Home Finder is the process. It's in other words, the computer system that allows people, you know, allows people to advertise, to bid, to shortlist. So Home Finder is the process, but obviously it's the policy that's the most important thing. And I think, you know, as Colin said, I think I'll come on one of that slide, I think it's 2002, but the aims of the policy haven't really changed. Yeah, you know, the aims are very much there about increasing housing choice, meeting housing demand. It's again, it's got a single point of access. So it's again, it's easier for the customer, how they register and how they bid, you know, for properties. It's an open, fair, transparent allocation system. We ensure consistency. It also helps, you know, to prevent homelessness in Northumberland, but also to create sustainable community. As I said there, and as Colin mentioned, it was introduced in 2002. I think it's been tweaked a number of times over the years. There's never been a fundamental review of the policy. And I think what we're looking at housing now, you know, in 2025 to what it was in 2002 is completely different as regards demand, type, and all of that's taken into account. So I think at the minute in the review, there's sort of 5 main areas. I think that, you know, opposing concern, and, you know, I get a lot of queries from yourselves. We get a lot of queries from residents about Home Finder, and it's normally about one of those 5 issues. So I'm going to sort of talk a little bit about each of those, sort of see where we're at the moment, about where do we need to go, and at the end, obviously, I'm more than welcome your view on some of them, and I need some more concerns that you have as well. Like, in assessment, what happens is when he fills in the Home Finder application, we've got a team who actually assess those applications into all of those bands, right up from, you know, band P, which is your priority band, and so it's where, you know, if you're homeless, and demolition, regenerate, repurchase order, it's all there, right down to band 3, which they're actually assessed as being adequately housed. And as Colin mentioned, they're the numbers that we're at the moment. We're currently, as of this presentation, in which I think was about the 7th of January, would be why 14,247 people registered on the list. Oops, sorry, actually registered on the list, but out of those, as you can see, and as Colin's mentioned, the 40%, 8,461 of those are actually in band 3, so they have not got a housing need. And to be honest, you could also say band 2R, which you've got 837. That's a restricted band, and where there potentially could be a very small need, but they might have no local connection to Northumberland. So that, you know, you've got that, but absolutely band 3 is that there is no, you know, no housing need. So what we are proposing to do at the moment is actually delete band 3. So if a person doesn't have a housing need, they're not been registered at all. And what this does, it allows, you know, how I started off with, things have changed, people are more complex. It would allow staff more time to deal with those vulnerable and those complex applicants. We do realise if we do that, obviously, we couldn't just say, oh, everybody in band 3, you know, that's it, you're off the list. But it would take, you know, we have to do an assessment of those in band 3, because what I mentioned there before about a meeting we had this morning with some of the providers, and it was quite interesting what they said, that our rents are cheaper than the RSLs, but sometimes we've got people in band 3 who could be classed as adequately housed, but actually they can't afford the rent, or they're on that borderline. So yeah, they might need a 3-bed house in, you know, Ashington, and they want to move to a 3-bed house in Bedlington or a 3-bed house in Cramlington, but that 3-bed house in Cramlington's got a cheaper rent. So we need to be careful, you know, that we don't, you know, just, you know, take away the financial side of it as well. But what it would do would be ensure that, you know, and as Colin said, people are thinking that's, you know, 14,500 people in Northumberland who don't have a home. That's not the case. You know, there are 5,786 in housing need. So that's the current proposal is to do that. The next thing, and I know this is, you know, a big issue again about local connection. Currently, anybody in the country can register on Home Finder, but they will be placed in either band 2 or a band 3. So actually, you know, if there is a property that is in quite low demand and it does go down to band 3, it is quite possible that somebody from Portsmouth, for example, could end up moving up, you know, up into Northumberland or into one of the rural areas. But what we are proposing, that, and I'm not going to go through that, but basically what we are proposing is that if an applicant doesn't meet the criteria, you know, if being a resident in Northumberland or worked in Northumberland or have family connections in Northumberland, that actually they just don't get on the list at all. So they would, you know, wouldn't be allowed on the list. Obviously, there would have to be some exceptions, you know, if they've been accepted as homeless. Sometimes the local connection would have to be waived. So obviously, sometimes people fleeing domestic violence. We've now got a new duty as well for people leaving the armed forces. So, you know, they don't have to necessarily have that local connection. And also there could be, you know, special circumstances where they need support and those needs are only in Northumberland. So I think, you know, there will always be exceptions, but the general rule would be that if they don't have a connection to Northumberland, they don't get on the list. And, you know, put there that's currently, you know, 1,178 applicants are registered with no local connection. The majority are in band 3, but there's also a number in band 2R. So I think if we deleted band 3 and we introduced the no local connection criteria, it's a bit of a mouthful, at this moment in time, there'll be about 5,500 genuine applicants on the register from Northumberland in some kind of housing need. And we've talked quite a bit again about the rural connection. So obviously you've very much got out in the rural areas, you know, recognising the lack of affordable homes and rural parishes. And we do have the rural, you know, have a connection there. There's those 5 points, but having lived in the parish, being continuous full of part-time employment, having parents, children, siblings, etc. For people to get those properties. One thing that we're looking at the moment is there's no priority on those criteria. So if somebody meets that criteria, then the earliest registration date is successful. And I'll just put an example there. We recently had a young family living in a parish in a 2-bed house. They needed a 3-bed. You know, the mum and dad and the kids have lived there all their lives. They bid on a property, but the property was allocated to a family whose sister lived in the parish. Now they were both in band 1, but the sister had an earlier registration date, and there was a bit of, you know, a lot of discussion about that, but we had to stick to the policy because actually there was nothing in the policy that said actually if you currently live in that parish, that you've got more of a priority than somebody who lives outside. So I think one of the things we're looking at is, should we prioritise that criteria to the fact that actually if you're living there or working there, you should take priority over somebody who's just moving in. So I think that, because that does cause problems that actually meet the criteria, but it could mean that somebody who's actually living there now would have to move out. So that is a bit of a discussion to talk about that as well. Homelessness is a big issue for us at the moment. And what happens at the minute, any homeless applicants are straight away put into band B, which means they then bid on properties. So, they're put in there, so you would hope that any property that they would bid on because they're homeless. But what we're finding is sometimes this is sort of encouraging applicants to be selective. It's raising sometimes unrealistic, expectations, and sometimes they're encouraged to wait longer for an ideal property. And this is resulting very much in lengthy stays in temporary accommodation. As you can see there, this isn't our own temporary accommodation. This is using like sort of bed and breakfast, Airbnb. So from April to 31st of December, that 255,000 was spent on temporary accommodation for homeless families. I'm not saying it was everybody just sitting there waiting for the perfect house, but there is a lot of situations where we've got homeless people who are sort of like, oh, well, no, I'd rather wait, or I want to live there. So what we're sort of proposing to do at the moment would be not to put them in band P, not to give them the opportunity to bid, but actually direct let a property to them. And homelessness legislation actually allows us to do this. It's classed as like a suitable offer. So, what we're proposing is that if somebody is in our temporary accommodation or they're in Airbnb, now waiting for a 3-bed house, the 3-bed house comes up, that we actually say to them, I mean, he has an offer to you. We're not going to say that if someone's currently living in Blythe and a 3-bed house comes available in Berwick, we'll be saying, right, you've got to go to Berwick. It would absolutely have to be what you class as a suitable offer, that it was within a reasonable distance in scale and things like that. And also we'd look at the Localism Act also allows us to discharge our duty in the private rented sector. I mean, I know there's issues with the private rented sector, but we just need to look more widely, I think, at trying to, offer these homeless people properties, not necessarily always in our stock. And also going on what I said about the beginning, that this policy is very much a partnership with the RSLs. Very rare that they take our homeless applicants as well, that are they normally in our stock. So there's a bit of work to be done with the RSLs as well about taking on homeless applicants. I think there's still a bit of a stigma that if somebody's homeless, they're going to be trouble or they're going to be bother. But that, what we're finding now, the numbers, I said, one of the biggest numbers of people who've got in band P, an awful lot of homeless people now are coming through that. They're in private rented, and the landlord's actually selling up. So they're having to move, or that the rents have gone through the roof and they can't afford it, and they're the two biggest ones that are coming through at the moment on homelessness. But it still doesn't stop the fact that people are staying in temporary accommodation much longer, and we think if we do this direct let, it will actually help us reduce those numbers. And the other one is the financial eligibility. Currently, on the policy, and as I say, it goes back to 2002. If an applicant's got more than £100,000 equity or savings, they're automatically just not allowed to join the register unless there's exceptional circumstances regarding health, disability, something like that. We've looked at a number of other authorities' policies, and they're all starting to reduce these financial eligibility. So, and it's not just like a blanket 100,000, it actually looking at the savings and equity available, the household will be assessed. And, and it's determined that the household can resolve their own housing need, then they wouldn't be eligible for the register. Obviously, that assessment will be based on, obviously, the capital, salary, equity, size of the household, and also the local housing market. This is more controversial, I think. And for somewhere like Northumberland, it potentially could be difficult because obviously, a property in Blythe, as opposed to maybe a property out in Huntwhistle or Corbridge or something, the market rent and or the market value is going to be hugely different. So it'll have to be thought through with this, but I think if we go ahead with this, the fact that if we do get rid of band 3, we're going to have staff that have got a lot more capacity to do this and to work on this as well. So they're the main things at the moment that we're looking at. I mean, we're drafting the policy. We will draft the new policy, talking very much with what part, and then there'll be a huge consultation process on the policy. But as well as that, and then put on there, we're also doing a complete review of Home Finder. So that goes alongside this as well. So like the actual system of Home Finder, we're doing a review of that as well. And that's come out under the best banner. So I think for me, it's just absolutely welcome any questions, and if there's any other concerns or issues that you think we've missed, but I'll go on to Rob as well.
Yeah,
because Rob have mentioned.
Yeah, can I just finish off by saying the important bit in what Susan's been saying is that this policy was introduced in 2002. Since then, the needs and pressures and complexity of housing has increased and changed. And we are saying that we are making these changes, we are proposing these changes to enable us to focus on avoiding people falling into problems, or if they are in problems, focusing those on the most clearest need. I'll just give you one example of again, to why this is so out of date, is that when this policy was introduced, basically that £100,000 figure you heard, that if you had an asset or savings more than £100,000 on your house, you couldn't apply for this. And in 2002, majority of houses in Northumberland would have been £100,000. And now the majority of houses in Northumberland are more than £100,000. So it's not working well in terms of if you've got someone in a property that's worth just more than £100,000, actually they could downsize to a rented accommodation and free up that house. That would be an advantage. So none of this is about just chasing the overall number. This is about us focusing on those in absolutely most need. And then backing that up, there's the common allocations policy, which is the approach we take, set out, and the Home Finder system. The Home Finder system is just basically the software administrative system, which is also well out of date. And we want to make that easier to use, more responsive, and easier for us as well to draw information out of, so we can do this prioritisation work.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. We'll go to questions now, but if I just point out there's on the figures in the different bands, it's actually 60% in band 3, not 40%.
Oh.
So
Right,
the numbers have been it's been flipped around. So yeah, it's 40% have some sort of need, 60% have no identified need.
Yeah.
But I'll just give the same point I made at the beginning of questions last time, is if we can please avoid giving local ward sort of questions. So we've got 4 people who've already asked to speak: Eileen, then Nick, then Anne, then Mark, and then Joe.
First of all, I just want to thank you, because every time I've rang up, you've been great. There's somebody been there to help, right? My point is, right, total on the housing register now is 15,247 in total, right? How many empty houses do we own in our stock which have been empty for such a long time? Whereas if somebody had gone in and fixed them up straight away, you could have a resident in there now. I can't, they do actually come and say that house has been, empty for a long time. Why isn't it done? And if that turnaround with the empty houses could get done quicker, it'll alleviate a little bit. So I just want to know a little bit about that. Right?
Yeah.
We have people who are in properties, and enforcement gets involved because of various reasons. That process takes ages, and I think the enforcement side of that could be looked at again. The 100,000 here, I don't think so look having the bank money, right? Absolutely not. Because if you want to buy house in Blythe now, I don't know, I've never bought a house for years, couldn't tell you. 100,000 plus, I don't know, right? However, what we've got to think, they might have money in the bank, but the cost of living crisis, the cost of living of running a house, that could quickly become a decline. So that figure needs to be looked at, like you say. I do agree with changing the policy where if you've had a family living in a village for years and years and years, and somebody from outside comes in and they're in front of that register, I'm sorry, but the people who have been entrenched in that village line, that's their community and they should have that first choice.
Yeah.
So that's a few questions there about the what levy and things like that.
It's probably best if I answer the questions as they emerge.
Yes, absolutely.
Right. First of all, voids or empty homes, right? Giving one figure saying we have 300 and something empty homes doesn't tell the story properly. We have a number of properties that get empty, going cleaned out and re-let fairly quickly. We have other properties where we need to go in, we go in and say, these do not meet modern standards. There can be asbestos in there, require structural work sometimes, as well as, fundamental work to the technology. And also, that empty homes we've got, hides the fact that some of them we are deliberately leaving empty. Because that number includes, say, a block where there are 10 houses, and there's still 2 people in 2 of the houses. We're waiting to move them on before we demolish those houses and they are rebuilt. So having information on this, we have talked about this, and we'll probably be looking at a way of reporting regularly on what our actual, what you call vacancy rate is. Okay. What we have done though, we've set it in the budget now. Susan and I have put in and set up a voids team who are explicitly going to focus on turning around those houses that can be turned around quick or fixed up and moved on as quickly as possible. And we've moved funding into that area from the rest of the housing revenue account budget. So that is a priority for us, and we're hoping to see that start to diminish as we move on.
Right. But the numbers in the low hundreds.
It's obviously the overall
available voids.
The overall figure doesn't tell a proper story. Okay, enforcement, I agree. And actually the paper that was given first about joining up all the enforcement teams, particularly on the prevention and quickening up legal work, all those things, we'll have to do that. Yes, and the issue of the £100,000, what we're actually saying is, will somebody be included and going on the list of how much equity they have in total needs to be looked at with a bit more subtlety. Because in some places, it might not be much more than £100,000. In other places, it might be quite a bit more than 100,000, depending on where you live. So we're looking at what other authorities do, and we're going to adjust it on that basis. At the moment, that's a figure from 2002 that we've not updated.
It's ridiculous figure.
So that will probably increase the number of people who are able to be registered, but that will be offset by the number of people reduced by taking away the band 3.
Thank you very much.
So just one other thing to say on the void as well is what we've found is that the vast majority of our properties are in excess of 70-year-old. So when they are becoming void, there's an awful lot of work has to be done on them. And I think a lot of the time we've been doing a lot more decorating, and some of the old properties existing like the Avenue and Blythe. As soon as people are moving in, as soon as they try to sort of take wallpaper off, plaster and stuff was coming off. So some of the work we're doing is actually being, stripping that wallpaper and replastering before people are moving in. So I think our properties, and that's why obviously as well we're moving money across, there's a lot more work to be done on properties as well when they're empty.
I think some kind of publication or publicity around that needs to happen because people don't see that, and it's right on social media. It's all over the voids and things like that. You know what I mean?
And that's a good idea, and that could actually happen. One of the places that could happen would be on the Home Finder website, because the people are looking for houses who have those concerns, who are most affected by that, are by nature people that are going onto the Home Finder website, aren't they? Yeah. So it's sort of great.
Yeah, so just to add on one thing, when Susan mentioned we have properties in excess of 60 or 70 years old, it's not only that, we have properties that are now aging. But actually, some of those were built only as short-term accommodation using prefab techniques.
Prefabs, yeah.
Yeah, and those, we look at those and those are not worth structurally repairing some of them. So that's what we're looking at, rebuild schemes.
Nick was next. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Thanks for the report and presentation. I'm comfortable with all the proposals. I don't have the level of understanding to pick up on problems, but I was reassured to hear that you're doing a consultation on this. So I'm relying on you to spot any problems, but from what I've read, I'm comfortable. I've just got a question and a comment. You presented the different eligibility criteria for the local connection. Normally resident in Northumberland, work in Northumberland, family connections in Northumberland. You haven't said whether that's an and or an or. So that I already. No, I'm assuming it's all.
Yes,
Yeah. So when I was reading, I was thinking that.
that's a high bar.
I started thinking, no, this doesn't work. So just checking.
Yeah.
Thanks. The other comment was on rural connections. You asked us whether we should prioritise the rural connections criteria. And I think we should. I actually thought we did already, but I think I was getting local connections and rural connections confused. So I've learned something. But I wanted to say, and I think I disagree with Councillor Carter in this one. I don't think we should, I don't think that a rural connection should ever be prioritised over banding. So,
I didn't say that.
or did you not?
No, I didn't.
Okay, good.
They don't have another person who wanted to move into that area because their sister moved there. It's not about band. I think somebody's needs on
Yeah.
priority needs.
Within
housing.
band.
Yeah.
So when I thought this through, I thought someone in the lower band, so someone in the lower band should not be allocated a property just because they have a connection to a parish.
Yeah.
Someone with a higher band should be prioritised. Yeah. Is that how it does work?
And that's how it does work, yeah. So what happens, obviously, you know, the property comes available, it's got a rural connection, and you'll always get people, all about what wants to be for that property. So, you know, the person at the top of the list could actually live in, it could be a property out in, say, Kielder, and the person actually lives in Ashington. Or, so what you do is you get all the people who've got the local connection, and then it's the person in the highest band and with the local or the rural connection that will get the property. As you say with that, but then there's no criteria within that.
Yeah,
So it's you can either live there for 3 years, work there for 3 years, or whatever. It's whoever's got the earliest period. And I think what we're sort of saying is, actually, if you're already living there or working there, should you not have some priority over, say, somebody who's got a mum or a dad or a sister who move in? That's the thing that we're thinking of.
Just check if you have two people, one person's higher priority with no local connection, the other is lower priority but with a a rural connection. It will be the person with a higher
No,
priority that got it.
not if they haven't got the rural connection.
Yeah, this is, like I say, this is not,
That's what I think the person with the higher priority band should get, is even if they don't have a connection. I think the priority band should from rural connection.
and herein, like I say, herein lies a problem in that what we've got, and the reason why I want to update it for clarity, at the moment, we've got the need categories, which gives you a way of prioritising, and then we've got your connection priorities. And with the way it was set up in 2002, those two don't readily relate to each other very well. So this is having a way which will give you a way of attaching appropriate weighting to need within a system. I'm saying it needs to do both. It can't just be at the moment, it can be read too simply. It needs to be more nuanced than that.
We've established a local connection is a necessity, is going to be a necessity.
Yeah.
Where that housing stock has a local connection policy applied to it, which doesn't happen in all cases.
Local connection that I'm worried shouldn't be allowed to trump.
I disagree.
That will be consulting on about.
Yeah.
But do we get that weighting between the two drivers? Correct.
This is something obviously you guys will know a lot more about. I would disagree with what Nick's saying there, because the reason I would say that is because if you've got a small community with very little social housing, the chances of somebody from that area actually being in the highest level of the highest band is quite small. Because and there are fewer people living there, so therefore fewer people, the percentage statistical probability of them being higher than somebody from a larger place is lower. And so therefore, I think over time, what will happen is you get an automatic allocation into another area from somebody, and your communities just dissipate. And over, say, 20 years, you end up with communities that actually have very few people living in social housing who have actually come from that community. And that's why, I mean, that's,
Happened already.
yeah.
Can I just add on one thing to that? Councillor Oliver has actually touched on a point here as well. And this is why we need to review this, is that you've got your conflicting not conflicting, you've got your weighting attached to rural connection. You've got your weighting attached to need. But the point that should be made is really important. So actually though, this relates to the void issue as well. Because you're talking about a point in time, and in rural areas a smaller population, sometimes you may need to keep properties vacant longer so you get someone with the appropriate requirement there. And unlike, say, in some parts of the county, almost by inference, if you get new affordable rent property established in a rural area, it may take longer to get it fully occupied by people with, a local need and a local connection. And all this needs to be balanced in how we do it. Otherwise, so it is unlikely that you drop into the market new affordable stuff, and at that very moment you have that exact number of people living locally who need it.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Anne was next, and then Mark.
Can I
and then
just
Jeff.
go back to the beginning? We are discussing social housing and not affordable housing.
Yeah, we're talking social.
I think that needs to be made clear because everybody gets muddled up, and I've brought this up before. We're talking about social housing for rent.
Yeah, something about the home.
And not affordable housing.
No.
And I think that needs because also on page 64, it does say affordable housing.
It can be.
This is what I was going to say, because we have these figures thrown at us about we're providing so many affordable housing. What we're not doing is actually providing new social housing, which is the need. But you have got this rural connection, maybe a lack of affordable homes in rural parishes. So I just wanted to know what that meant by, did you mean social houses or what?
Either.
I just need to know because everything's getting muddled all over.
We're
talking about social housing.
Well, and this is the difference between the plain English definition of affordable housing and the planning sense of it. What that's saying, there's a lack of affordable housing, as in you can afford to buy it, not actually technically defined affordable housing as provided by different mechanisms. It's in, there's a lack of property which people can afford to buy.
Fine.
And I think that sometimes the difficulty is for ourselves in the council, most of our rents are a social rent.
Yes, yeah.
But the housing associations have an affordable rent, but it's still rent.
So I think you need to make that.
Yeah.
Sure what you mean by affordable rent rather than affordable homes, because we're getting everybody's getting muddled up with, we started with affordable homes and it's actually social. But I think that's
a good point, because affordable is 85% of local market averages, which in Corbridge could be, over £1,000 a month. And to buy an affordable house, it could the average house is 285,000. So 85% of that is a lot of money.
I mean, I just think it's got to be clear about what we mean if we're making a policy.
Can I just add as well, remember those eligibility criteria for accessing affordable housing as affordable to purchase. And we want to make sure that the two systems are actually closer in terms of the criteria.
Make sure they're clearly separate.
Yeah, well, they are separate, but they need to follow the same ideology.
Otherwise, so can I just ask you very quickly? So that was one thing. I know you mentioned about I have a problem with people who are now selling their second homes or rental because they bought it for pensions. you know, when they're growing up, they say, oh, we'll buy a house and we'll get another one, we'll get an income for it and everything else. But because of the government change in legislation and the tax burden on it as well, a lot of people are selling. And I'm finding that as a big diff. Are you finding there's quite a lot of people in that position?
Yeah, I mean, there's absolutely for that, you know, obviously the second homes or what have you, they've got the official, the council tax burden. But also what we are finding is though, and as this is probably down to the popularity of Northumberland, a lot of private landlords are actually going into the holiday let.
Yes.
Or the Airbnb, not, you know, so they're going to get as much per week or more per week in the height of the season than they can get it for a month on long-term rentals. So that's causing a lot of problems as well.
Maybe that should be looked at as far as council tax is concerned.
Get away from the legislation.
Because that is something that should be. And the last one is rural exception sites. So if we bring in these banding things, if I have a rural exception site where we social housing builds, you know, 20 social houses, and will they be will the new bandings come into being then? And will they be the same?
Yeah,
So we have you know, if you have a rural section site, we have obviously the constitute thing about exactly who is local and how they define. Will that be similar to what you're putting in here?
This is the point.
That's a planning thing, but it has to be similar.
This is the point I was making, in that we use eligibility criteria for people accessing affordable housing, say affordable for purchase or shared ownership. Okay, and there's a local requirement in there, etc. If though, say for sake of argument, say Benicia were involved in a scheme to build 10 houses for affordable rent, the renting of those would be via the home finder system, via the common allocation policy. But if you're building them for sale,
The sale.
That's a different.
Rural exception site.
Yes.
For social housing.
Well, if they're going to be managed by a registered social landlord, be it ourselves
Yeah.
or a housing association, it will go through this process.
That's all I want to
Yeah.
know. So it'll be the same. So if you change it, it'll be used as part
Yes,
of the rural
it will,
exception site policy.
Yes.
Thank you.
Right. Okay, thank you. Mark?
Thanks, Chair. A few comments and a kind of a question. I think it's good that if there's going to be a policy that says it's going to be create a single point for all social housing. I think that's really important. And I think we need to ensure moving forward when the home finder review happens that is for all social housing provider. Because at the minute we've got numerous social housing providers telling residents not to bother with home finder.
Yep.
And they're doing it direct. So that undermines all the people that sat there currently in P1 that cannot get property. So we need to make sure that this policy holds those housing associations to account, because at the minute we're pretty toothless when it comes to issues with that. The P1 and the band, and I understand that. The issues I'm starting to see is so you may have somebody in P1 banding, but the house that comes available is for over 55s. But it doesn't bring in disability. So somebody with disability, that the banding doesn't work for them. Even if they're sat in a P1, they might be the 15th on the list, but because that house is over 55s, and I don't think we fully understand or have a grip of what is disability, because we've had a housing provider recently say your disability isn't a disability we recognise. Now, if we can get that into this policy, I think that then strengthens the handle once again we have over these housing providers, because they're not operating for the best of our residents as far as I can see. But I do really like the rural part that you've put in. Because our families are always telling me that, you know, my kids aren't going to be able to live here. And I think that is really important. It's about keeping community there. It's keeping, you know, we don't mind people moving in, that add a bit of diversity, but there has to be that core
community value there, community housing there for local people. They can stay where they've been brought up and lived and work. And that's what you want. That's the only way the rural communities are going to survive, if there's young people being able to get into some form of social housing to get on the ladder. So I wonder if we could look at the disability side in the banding and make sure that is strengthened.
Yeah.
So no matter what your disability is, housing providers don't have the right for them to pick and choose their residents, because at the minute they are cherry picking.
Yeah.
Easy work.
Yeah, we've all updated to it.
Yeah, that's really good
Thanks.
point.
That's one of the things.
Thank you. Thank you, Mark. Jeff.
Thanks. You can, I wouldn't have your job for all the work. I mean, this has been a, civilized discussion so far, and
Don't spoil it.
don't worry, I shan't. But this is people's lives we're talking about, and honestly, Susan, I couldn't cope with this. It was me. Brilliant. Just keep it up, keep steady, and Rob, make sure she gets all the support she needs, because you've heard the discussion here about rural allocations and keeping communities together and all the rest of that stuff. There are more views on that than you can shake a stick at. So I don't know what the right line to walk is. So it might as well be this one for me than any other, because you've backed it up with evidence as far as I can see. But anyway, the questions I've got, ultimately, is this allocations policy, is it a council decision or is it a cabinet decision?
I think what we need to do the review, engage with people, because this isn't just about county council looking into itself, it's talking to parishes, to all members, other stakeholders. And I think we're to leave space for that. We might not change it fundamentally, but we might change it fundamentally. So I think when we know the nature of the changes, we will make a decision then on
You should have been a politician. That's a politician, that's it. So yeah. I just wanted to go back to 2002.
I think so. I think intuitively, I think this is something that will probably
go to council.
Council.
Yeah, but my gut feel is it would be the sort of thing.
Okay, so
and that's certainly a recommendation we can make as a committee.
Certainly, then, if we're going to add recommendations, can we say that once we have this new policy, that it is we're not going to leave it 22 years? Can we have a 2-yearly review or a yearly review? Not a chat once, but a proper, is this still working? Yes, it is, fine. No, we need to change this, then change it, because the world is a different place now, 20 years on.
I think might be government changes.
So that was that one. And how often do we look at the band 3 at the moment? Do we just accept anybody that wants to be on it? We just say, oh yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
So we're actually what you're talking about doing is building a gate.
Yeah.
There's a qualification. If you don't qualify, then presumably we're telling them, if somebody's in band 3, that there's not really much chance of them ever being asked to.
Yeah, can I make a point here? And this is a common issue. Is back when we used to have what was called the council house waiting list, there was an element of time in there. You accrued points.
Yeah. What's
to be clear, band 3. If you're in band 3, you do not accrue any points. So if you're on it for 1 year or 25 years, you are still not locked into property.
And I think one of the things that happens, obviously, if people are on band 3, they've got no need. They think they have, they want to move. So they do create an awful lot of work because they're constantly, they're appealing, they're coming to us, they're complaining. So I think that, and even just say, you haven't got a hope. So they're doing everything they can to at least get a band 2.
Yeah. So then can I just remind everybody, the vast majority of the houses that the council own are in what was the old Blythe Valley in Alnwick.
Yeah.
So we don't have anything up in Hexham or.
No.
No.
So, you know, that people need to be reminded, I think, partly because of what Councillor Carty was saying about, you know, empty homes and all the rest of that stuff. That the stuff that's actually under our control is Alnwick.
Yes.
In what used to be Blythe Valley.
Yes.
So, can I just ask then, when we say common allocation policy, common to what?
Common to all providers. So this allocations policy will apply to not just ourselves and where we own, where we retain stock, but to Benicia and Carbon.
So
And other
all the RS.
registered social landlords.
Are we actually talking with them about this?
Well, we talked to them this morning
Yeah.
about it.
Right, so
Yeah.
the common allocation policy, presumably they'll have to go through their process because they've got management and boards and all the rest of that stuff. So presumably we can't just say this is Northumberland's common allocation policy. If Benicia turn around and say, hang on a minute, we don't like this rule a bit, you can stick that.
They need to be fully engaged in us updating it. We manage both the common allocation policy and the home finder system. So with due engagement, we can shape this.
But picking up what Councillor Mather said then, do we have actually any powers of enforcement over them? Or is it a kind of, this is the policy, isn't everybody happy?
Yeah, there is. The route, I would say, normally for both quality issues and other matters to do with stock not in our direct control, that there is an independent housing ombudsman that tenants can go to complain.
Yeah, but I mean, how long is that?
And also there's a housing regulator who will go in and do regular inspections on both ourselves and other providers to make sure that the stock, the quality, the mechanisms, the tenancy agreements are all
You know, volunteers are better than pressed men every day of the week. So can we just make certain that, you know, if they come back and say something to us about, well, actually, that, you know, we think this is generally fine, but this bit really don't. Are we willing to take advice and suggestions from them, or we just write this and say there you are?
I would say this needs to be an open process, but then a joint commitment needs to be made that all RSLs are going to follow it.
Yes, so that's, we've got, so I'm slightly awkward position here as a chair because I've got everybody wants to comment on what we're talking about at the moment. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep into the original, we literally had three people say they want to comment, 4 people now. And Brian was the next questioner, so I'm just going to keep in that order. And if you can just remember your comments, and we'll come back to it. Otherwise, we're going to get completely out.
I'll finish and then I'll shush then, Chair. And yeah, I'm quite. I think it's a good idea to build this barrier and say we've got 461 persons on the list, but you know they're never going to get a councillor. We're never going to be able to build the capacity, so the list is now. That. But you need to make, because of social media and people who don't understand and who would rather make mischief than think about the people's lives that we're actually can affect. Let's concentrate on making certain that people understand A, how difficult this is, and B, that Homes for Northumberland, all the other the registered social providers are doing the best they can with the resources they've got available. And we are going to make mistakes, but if we've got a set of reasonable policies and reasonable guidance that the man on the African omnibus can think, well, that's fair. And that's communicated to everybody, and everybody understands the rules and understands that what we're trying to do is provide quality homes for people.
Yeah.
Then,
Yeah.
then, you know, that's basically all.
And I think that's what this whole process is about, isn't it?
Exactly. So,
Trying to
you know,
achieve that. Yeah.
Carry on. Get it to where it needs to be, get it adopted. And there's just one more question that I've written down and I've just come back in my mind.
Right. We'll be very quick.
Yeah, it will be. When you talk about sending people to private landlords, are we talking about us having an agreement with the private landlord? Or are we talking about saying to somebody, we can't help you, but we know there are houses available, and then we'll just send the person to them, or are we going to get involved in the process?
No, it would be, I mean, obviously you've got an accredited landlords.
Yeah.
So it would be actually working with those landlords, and we would say to people, sorry, at this moment in time, we can't help you, we can't house you, but somebody here, somebody can't. So we sort of don't get involved. We would just say, well, you know, here's a private landlord. Off you go, then obviously they become the tenants of that private landlord.
Okay, and would we be up for any kind of deposit?
Oh, and we've got a rent deposit scheme, so yeah, absolutely, we, you know, would help and support them in that way, because we appreciate going to private landlord, they obviously have to put rent up front.
Landlord would be here, we would be there, and then there would be no legal agreement between the two. Excellent.
Apart from the fact that we're an accredited landlord.
Yeah.
We'd only do that with accredited landlords.
Yeah.
And then if there's a problem about that person getting access to that property because of the environment involved, we have a way of underwriting it.
Right, good, thank you.
Good, thank you. We've got 50, because we need to be finished by 4 o'clock, please. So we've got 15 minutes left. Brian.
Firstly, thank you very much for the presentation. The home finder on previous scrutiny meetings that we've had has, well, I can only speak for myself, it's been highly criticised, and I think it's totally and utterly unfair. The bidding process for it is totally and utterly unfair. And the reasons why I bring it out, I think Mark mentioned it about disabilities. Well, the reality is what happens to Mr. and Mrs. Cannybody that want to get a quality house to live there the rest of their life, bring kids into it. They've got absolutely no chance of getting a quality council house. So as much as we say, you know, we're looking for quality houses, not for law, just for the people that will got, dare I say, problems or issues. So there, I still think there has to be a window of opportunity for that. And I think that comes under your band 3. So, you know, what happens if you've got a couple that are living with a mum and dad that want to put that down and then they're down for a council house and they can't get it.
Be overcrowding that would.
Yeah, they would. They would have if somebody in a situation like that, I would expect, you know, we would expect those to potentially be in, say, band 2, band 3. I think band 3 at the minute is more sort of, if somebody's living in a 3-bed house in Framlington and fancies moving to Blythe.
Yeah.
But there's absolutely no need or reason or whatever. So that's why they would be in band.
Yeah, but it's getting into quality houses that they can spend the rest of their life in and be reassured that they're not going to get thrown out if they went to the private sector. So it's out reassurance that they can live there for the rest of their life as long as they behave. The homelessness, I would love to know, obviously, you've got your figures from 2002 to where we are now, you know, the jump from there, dare I say, and I'm not getting into politics, but it's the whole idea of how bad has it become over that short amount of period. And just a question, the £100,000, is that Northumberland wide?
Yeah.
And just if I picked it up the wrong way, what you're looking at is rural and urban to change those and name different areas.
And that's one of the things to look, I think,
Do you not feel as though that maybe everybody should stay the same because they're bringing in a two-tier system into it?
I think,
Because coming back to the chair says he's got a house that's worth 280,000. We've got them in Ashton, we've got them in Blythe, we've got them all over. So the price of houses shouldn't be the issue.
I think, again, it's open to it, you know, we've got to do an awful lot of consultation, but I think, you know, what you said there, and Rob said that, and I think Eileen mentioned it, £100,000 isn't going to get your house anywhere. So, you know, I think, but so I just looked on Rightmove in Blythe, so I was just thinking, right, if you were an elderly couple and you're in your own home and actually you need a bungalow for medical reasons. If you go on Home Finder in Blythe, you kind of get a bungalow under 200,000. So if we're saying, sorry, you've got 100 grand, sorry, off you go. But I get what you're saying, maybe you just need to put on, yeah.
What you're trying to do is you're trying to introduce a two-tier system of rural and urban, and I'm totally against it. If you want to, this is why I said the 100,000 is Northumberland wide, that's fine. If you're going to bring that figure up, I've got a problem with it. But the problem has to be county-wide and everybody has to be.
What we say, just to be really clear about this. So at the moment, I'm sitting today, anywhere where you live in Northumberland, if you've got assets of more than £100,000, you can't go on the list. Okay. First of all, since 2002, that's changed such that probably applies to everywhere now, and not just it was perceived that would. In 2002, that was meant to, affect people with expensive houses. Okay. What we're actually saying is, A, we want to move away from having a single figure of £100,000, but also we need to include in it people's actual precise needs as well.
Yeah.
Because sometimes you have somebody with a slightly more or less asset who may actually warrant going on the list. At the moment, it's just a simple thing. If you've got 100 asset worth more than £100,000, you can't go on the list, and we're saying we want to change that. We are not bound to any particular way of doing it. Apart from that, that figure will go up. Still, everyone's houses are worth more than 100,000.
Just one final question. So you mentioned around planning and around rented properties. Hypothetically, does that give allowances for a developer to build anywhere in Northumberland if he decides he wants to build some houses that he's going to rent out there? So, for example, if it was in Hexham, Corbridge, Ashington, wherever, does that provider of those houses that will be rented, or could be part rent and social housing, whatever it comes under, is there an allowances? Because there's a brick wall there at the minute if anybody wants to build that kind of scheme.
Yeah, there's a policy approach that says that you can build houses on allocated housing sites, full stop, okay? But if you want to go outside those areas and say building rural areas or other areas outside the plan, you need to demonstrate that your scheme meets an identified housing need. Because you can't say, I think there's a need for affordable rent here, therefore I want to build in the countryside. You have to demonstrate that, and then that will be tested through the process. There is also a thing that Councillor Dale's touched on called the rural exemptions policy, which is that if you can demonstrate both the need and you have local support, and what that means normally is via a local plan process, say, then you can, in the existing plan, build sites up to 20 units side settlement boundaries. Okay. In the green belt, even potentially, yes. Yeah, and we are starting to see schemes like that coming through now. But we can talk about how we change planning policy to support this process at another time. Yeah.
Right, thank you. So we've got three people wanting to come back in, and then we will have to round up.
Yeah.
But if I ask those three people to be really brief, Eileen was first, then Anne, then Mark, and then we'll sum up and. Yeah.
Mine's really quick. First of all, just a few points I would like some answers on, just quick answers. I would still sell in some of our houses stuff. People want to buy a council house, right? what's our plans? How many new ones can we actually buy for us as a council, beneath rent or whatever? But the legal thing that Jeff touched on, that was what interested me when Rob's talked about working with social providers. I think that's a massive piece of work to undertake, and it needs to be done properly, right? Because you'll have to have that consistent approach. You'll all have to have the agreement, in this agreement with all social providers, to basically come together, so that if you've got someone wanting a property and say Carbon Homes or somebody, for instance, has got a property, you're going to have that consistent approach.
Yeah.
It not just because Carbon doesn't want such and such in, or another provider may not want a certain type of person. You're going to have a really, really tight contract built in here to get this right.
Yeah.
And that's a big bit of work. So are you going to undertake that bit of work? Because if say a social housing provider doesn't do something in that contract, how are you going to enforce it so that do you know what I mean?
Yeah, okay. Yeah. Okay, two quick answers. So firstly, right to buy. Government are currently considering amendments to the right to buy scheme in two ways. That is eligibility for right to buy. And there is talk of excluding newly built or specialist housing products for the right to buy. And also, though, there's going to be a maximum discount available, which will mean that we will get more money from this right to buy. And there is discussion taking place with government about being able to pool right to buy generated funds with things like Section 106 funds and other funds to enable us to cross-subsidise new affordable housing schemes. Okay, that is still going through a political process nationally, though. Yeah, in terms of the process to get to a new allocation policy and a new home finance system, absolutely yes, we will be working with the registered providers. And it's important to note as well, we're also going to review the housing strategy, and we want to position that very much as a county-wide housing strategy, not just a housing strategy for how we manage our own homes and deliver services. And we will want all players in that to be like co-signatories to that as well. And so we can have a joint statement on how we tackle some of these problems.
Yes, because they don't want to join, they don't have to. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Anne?
Yeah, just one thing. Can I just ask you, when you say about the RFL and the homemaker, etc., the new OSC policy, are they all signed up to it who actually have and run social housing in Northumberland? I mean, I have Riverside, for instance.
At the minute, anybody, if they advertise anything through Home Finder, they're signed up with the common allocation policy.
Right. So if they don't have to.
No, I mean, yeah, that's
actually.
But they all are.
Yeah.
No, that's all I wanted to hear. They're all signed up to it, so that gives us actually.
Yeah.
And the other one very quickly, relating to what Mark said, was in the rural areas we have people who live in tied cottages, and they do put their names down, though they're still in housing, because in 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, they will be homeless. So if you ask the question about these people, whether you put them on to 3, but the point being is that once they're out of the house, if they're made homeless, it's the end of their tied cottage tenancy. Will you then pick them up as homeless as priority 1? Seriously, I mean, that is a big issue in itself. And also likewise, just so everybody knows, there's more people actually in need of priority housing that are actually living with their parents. And I know people, and I've said, well, if you want to get onto priority 1, top priority, you have to be homeless, basically. And nobody's going to make their children or family or grandchildren homeless. So there is a hidden number there, which I'm sure you'll be aware there's a hidden number there. But certainly I do, as far as the tied cottages are concerned, or work-related tied cottages, whatever, it's an important issue in rural areas.
the priorities, and this is how we require ourselves, already the priorities, if you are at risk of being homeless, not just you are prioritised accordingly. And as well, where you have a family cushion already, but where we have people who are having, say, to live at home with us there, who really are married because of problems. Well, they are not at risk of homelessness because they can't live, but they will put in the category of living in overcrowded accommodation. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to.
Right.
All this is about the nuance and actually how we refine it.
Yeah.
And understanding has changed as well as pressures since 2002.
Thank you. And then final question to Mark. And then
Yeah,
I'll sort of
Chair.
sum up.
I was just thinking, like Councillor Reid was speaking about, what teeth do I have? So if they've all signed up to the common allocation policy, they're using the home finder as it is currently, or some of them are. But they'll be forced to use it fully in the new one. So they can't just have their sneaky secret list. All the houses will be going through home finder, is that right? The new one.
Yeah. That's the aim.
So if they don't play ball and we that has to pick up the mess, find disabled discrimination, poor allocations, lots of other things we come across, can we as a council somehow, we often give them sites, give them planning to continue to expand their housing stock. Can we stop that? Can we stop giving them sites, stop working with them and just say, until you come into standard, until you come into line and treat your residents with some respect, because a lot of them don't. We're not going to continue it. Well, yeah.
I think the answer to that, in terms of how we would actually do that, the more effective way will be that when we relaunch the allocations policy in the home finder system, when we get everyone to sign up to it, it will need to include as well how we deal with complaints and difficulties, because it would be legally extraordinarily difficult to try and take action by the planning system. But there's the role there, I think, of being very clear with, that people will join this system, the revised system, the version 2, on the basis of the allocation systems and, almost, a commitment to do things in a certain way. And within that, we could include for ourselves as well, how complaints are resolved, because we will get complaints about our, allocations as well, because people are often unhappy with that.
There has to be a fine. There has to be something to hold them to account that, we won't continue to give them council land or support them in applications. There has to be some kind of sweet teeth.
And we've got the ombudsman as well, haven't we? But I think I can see the difficulty of saying you can't have planning permission. That would probably just be illegal.
But I mean, when we're giving them land, because it's the great thing to do, let's give this housing provider more.
We should use the land and build ourselves.
Just saying, you're not getting any more land.
Yeah, there's a difference between statutory decisions and non-statutory decisions.
Great.
I'll go to
I think broadly speaking, what I've heard today is that the things that you've already suggested, you've got pretty unanimous support across the room. There's been a little bit of disagreement about where rural allocation but I think everybody agrees that within rural allocation, there should be some prioritisation. And I think everybody broadly agrees with the things that you've suggested. I think we as a committee are very keen that you tie in the other RSLs as much as possible to all of this, using whatever mechanisms we can. I think the other thing is that I think as a committee, as councillors probably universally, we all see firsthand that Home Finder is in a bit of an antiquated system, doesn't really support the existing policies properly. In some cases, it's probably not fit for purpose. But so when we change these policies, Home Finder absolutely has to be modernised, replaced, updated, at the same time. And so there's no point doing one without the other. We have to have the mechanism to be able to implement the policies. And I think there was some strong talk about disability and how that builds in. There's talk about the actual who ultimately agrees these policies, whether it be full council or and I think what everybody's looking for is a transparent, consistent approach that is implementable with a good system behind it. And so absolutely fascinating discussion. Thank you very much. I think it's important to all of us as councillors because we all get approaches from our residents. There never will be enough houses to house everybody in social housing that would like to be. But I think some of the things that are happening nationally will probably make that problem worse, but other things will make it better. So, you know, there are more taxation on holiday lets, more expense, you know, will encourage private rented housing, but other taxes will probably take people out of the private rented housing market. And so, you know, I think all we can do is do as much as we can, as quickly as we can, and build as many as we can. And then encourage through the planning system as many as possible as well. So it's been a really, I think, really worthwhile discussion. Thank you very much. And thank you to the committee.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I just want to say thank you so much for pointing out that band 3 is 60%, not 40. It was deliberate mistake that put in the CP regulation.
We knew that.
Never.
We knew all of that.
You should have checked your report. That's Colin.
Pages 71 to 78, we've got the monitoring reports. Is there anything you want to add, Sean?
Just to confirm, looking in there, discussing with our colleagues at the combined authority for the outcome to the next meeting in February to talk about their work with the transport plan. And we also have our own strategic transport officer to talk about our priorities within that.
And is there one more after that before
the
March?
The
April meeting. Yeah.
Chair, just as a thought for the February meeting, and I know it'll be a long one, that one, but because we've had experienced councillors around here that have lived, you know, through the storms that we've had recently.
Yeah.
Would it be advisable, we're having recent storms again, can we have an update where we can give positive feedback about what we went through over this cycle, this council, as a wind up? Because in May, as a lot of us might not be around to have that positive discussion and raise the things that worked, but also raise the things that didn't work.
Can I come back about that, Chair? I'm in discussion with civil contingencies at the moment about that very fact. So the north of the county, the journey Northern Power Grids went on, for example, has been very impressive. Still lots to do, but they've went on that journey. Scottish Power are where we were with them and Stormarwen still. So there's still that conversation of we need to influence power companies to improve, and also, you know, there'll be bits that we could do better, but I'm not sure, because I sit on the emergency committee, I'm not sure if we're going to do that piece of work as the emergency committee or whether it's coming back to scrutiny. I'm not quite sure, but because it's not really meaty enough to do another deep dive like we did the last time.
But we could have a short update presentation. We could do so.
Chair, that's all it is. It seems as though it's a bit of a loose end.
Yeah,
we can tie that up.
If I do some digging and put an email background and see
Can we
what you
look at the
think.
recommendations from the Stormarwen?
And how
And
how they've been implemented. Yeah.
In this store, I did different, but it would be seen if they were being applied, because I can tell you one or two
Sean,
things.
Eileen, that's a good idea.
I think I brought it at this committee and I also brought it to the Bytown Forum. You know, we've all got floodplains in our area. And we have floodplain maps, right? But the floodplain maps only indicate where flooding will occur, where the sea levels rise or the river level, right? Now, every single councillor in their ward will know the pinch points in their ward, what floods. I know where floods in my ward, but we don't have a map. There's no way we have a map in Northumberland which will say Harcourt and Blythe will flood, right? And I think if we had something between us, just for us in Northumberland County Council, where we've got our pinch points where we'll flood, we know that prior to the storm coming, we'll get the gully cleaners in there, we'll make sure that people have the sandbags,
Okay.
things, we need to do that.
Yeah,
We're not
so
gonna do
Eileen, I think that exists. I think there are two separate things. There's the Environment Agency's sort of national flood risk map, which is fluvial floodings of rivers and coastal flooding. And
It's got, I get warnings all the time.
But on top of that, the council, through the Northumbria Integrated Drainage Partnership, have a map which goes down to surface water flooding, which might be water running down a hill, or it might be water coming out of drains or whatever. So that map does exist. I think the question we probably need to ask is, how do we get access to it?
Because things have changed. The storms we get now.
They do add, because I've actually asked the flood, Nick Watson, who's in charge of the flood department, I've asked him, and he said, every time we get notified about something, we add it to the map. So it does exist. Yeah.
Sure, I missed when the council plans coming to scrutiny. Is it February?
February.
The council plan coming to scrutiny.
Oh, yes, 26th February.
Yeah.
The next week.
The consultation closed on Sunday. Is that a problem? Have we missed the boat? Is it too late to influence the plan?
It's a train transport.
Yeah.
Well, it was the mayor's combined authority.
You were never going to influence it, so don't worry about it.
I don't think it is, because what we can do, because obviously the people like Stuart McNaughton would be working very closely with the North East Combined Authority. So I think that's a different, probably more effective.
Just through you, we've got mappers from both sides on there that we can filter it, or get them answers back.
And the presentation will be in two parts. It'll be the work that Necker have done as part of the consultation, but it'll also be our own officers, mentioned Stuart, to discuss our priorities within that plan, how they will be implemented. So it'll be an opportunity to feed into that.
Can I just ask if the local bus, we've got our local bus, which I never hear about, I don't know if you do, Nick, in our area, but the local person who looks at the bus services, which is meant to feed in.
Oh, yeah.
All that bus stuff. So where's that disappeared to? Because it's disappeared. I haven't, I don't know who is that.
John Riddle, isn't it?
Do you know who it is now? John Riddle.
John Riddle.
Yeah, I never heard another thing. So what basically has the council put in through these area representatives put into this, or have they?
Yeah, well, that's the whole purpose of the presentation in February, to ask those questions.
What I'm saying is the council should have put in something.
The council are working constantly as part of the whole Necker arrangement, and so there will be.
I've never had so many buses.
We haven't seen anybody.
Great, there's no urgent business, and I think we can close.
We want to close the meeting straight.